The views expressed on Latitude podcast are for entertainment purposes only. You're listening to Latitude. Find out where we're headed. I made you pull out your driver's license because I just absolutely could not believe that was someone's true last name.
Yeah, I think they're
And where we've been.
about being a mom of 5 kids.
We don't always have to agree. You're upsetting the talent.
Oh,
when
you're
you
upsetting
talk
the
about
talent.
the rock stars.
And if you don't
upsetting
deal
them.
with things,
But we're always going to talk it out, hash it out, and get on the same road.
whenever I micromanage, I don't respect the boss. I feel like they have no trust in me whatsoever.
Time to take this journey together.
No one is stagnant, growing or going backwards.
Right. It's time to plot our course and find our latitude. Well, hello there. Welcome to our very first episode of Latitude. I'm here with the incredible Jonathan Sweat.
The one and only,
The one and only.
the legend.
Yeah. And do you remember the first time I heard your last name? I made you pull out your driver's license because I just absolutely could not believe that was someone's true last name.
Yeah, I think there was actually some laughter.
There still is.
Okay. Well,
Well, welcome. We're here doing our first ever podcast, and we're so excited to bring Latitude to you. We're going to explore all things that have to do with improving our styles of leadership and making an impact, and how we can grow and be productive and influence others, to not for some kind of selfish motive, but to help others produce, because if they're productive, we're productive, right? And why don't you tell everybody what we're up and about, and you know, whatever you've got, I'm sure they want to hear.
okay. So basically, we're going to kick this off today with talking a little bit more, like Trish said, about leadership, different styles of leadership. Sometimes various styles can certainly be effective, and so we're just going to kind of dive right in. And we've talked a little bit about this recently around passive leadership, aggressive leadership, what I respond to better. Sometimes what she may respond to is going to be a little bit different than what I do. And there can be benefits, pros and cons, and passive leadership, aggressive leadership, and there's probably a lot of different styles in between those two.
There are. What I found out through doing a little bit of research before we did this podcast, there are so many. One website said there's 17, another book said there's 10, and I think there's all kinds in between. But a little bit about my background. I have a background in business and marketing, excuse me, and teaching as well. I have a big, strong background in doing charitable groups. So there's leadership involved in there, and there's subordination involved in that. But we all have.
How about being a mom of 5 kids?
That has its own, being in charge, whether you want to or not. And there's that component in life. You're going to be put in those positions, whether you were expecting them. Then there's going to be times when you're told to hold off and hold back, and to be subordinate. So there's all those interplays. And Jonathan, you want to give them a little bit of background and context? I mean, it's going to be similar. You've got professional situations, and go ahead.
Yeah. So a lot of context, because there's mainly been a lot of years, but I don't know, coming out of college, I went into a management role, and I don't think I was prepared to lead other people at that time, because I really wasn't even sure how to lead me or my family, much less others. And it's funny because at the time, coming out of college, going into retail management, I think I was leading about 100 associates. Um, and again, I don't think I should have been responsible for leading 3. but that's the role I was put into. And so a lot of trial and error and a lot of mistakes made. But I think that's also where we learn to grow is by failing and making mistakes and learning, okay, well that didn't work. What do I do next? And also kind of self-discovering what type of leader I am. And I think that took a while as well too. And I think that's still a journey that at least I'm on trying to figure that piece out and how I can motivate and persuade people to do other things. And I think if you were to define leadership, is that not sort of how you define it? Trying to lead and persuade others to act in accordance with what a certain goal may be.
Well, I think it's the way it should be defined. I think there's all this, as we go through this, some of this is going to be rhetorical. It'll be obvious that there is an ideal situation. I do think that's the way it should be defined. However, I think we as humans want to grasp that title. I've never known anyone that said they never wanted to be a leader unless they're going to be this type of leader that we're going to talk about because eventually I think we have a God-given need to know, "Oh, I'm good at this. I could," whatever this is, because God gives us talents and abilities and desires, and I think sometimes those propel us to put ourselves in positions where we could be helping, and sometimes we just want that role because some people just are attracted to the term of being in charge, but that's not always what a leader is. A leader doesn't always mean being in charge. But, I don't wanna get confusing before we and I don't wanna put the cart before the horse, but I can say that I witnessed some transformation, and Jonathan is, certainly we were married young, and so we had to mature. Some of that is some maturity, and, there are idealistic definitions for leadership, and there's ideal leaders, and then there's also the opposite, I think. So, I think it's really important to define these extremes because I think one style is very obvious, and I think it's always given a negative connotation, and I think the second style we're going to talk about and these are both extremes and there are this bridge between the extremes where everybody wants to be. But the second style is the one that really surprises me that most people don't even know exists. Like you
Okay.
have to tell them it exists. And then they're like, no wonder this didn't work when I was working with this person. Then they can relate to it.
Yeah.
So
And before we get into that, I think it's important to maybe define this too. Who is a leader? And what defines a leader? Because, as I mentioned, when I got out of college, I did go into retail management. I was leading or managing other people. However, everybody, regardless of what your role, title, anything is, I believe everybody is a leader of some sort because you've got other people looking to you. And you also are a leader of your own soul, leader of your own thoughts. And, you know,
I hadn't
that
thought about
requires
that.
self
I had not
discipline.
thought about
So, and I know at different times of my life, I've responded differently to different types of leadership. And I think that's kind of what you're going into next, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, I would hope like, we're in our 50s, there's just we may look like we're in our 30s, we know, we get that all the time, but just kidding. Um, I would hope that you would, as a person, if you're, like, in your 20s, you're responding 2 decades later in a different manner, that is what you should be doing, but how many people do we know our age and even some older that have never understood or grown in that area in their life. They're just spinning their wheels because, yeah, you are going to be in charge of your um, own self. You're going to be leading your own self. And what I thought I liked as a 25-year-old turns out to be very different
Yeah.
now looking back.
Sure.
So, the first type of leader, and I'm sorry for my glasses, but I just need them. Uh, Everyone's going to be familiar with because I think it's presented to us as, if you remember the '80s, like we do, a lot of there were a lot of business, top tier, high driving, movies, okay? And the top dog was always this, like, big magnet, energy, micromanager, trying to get to the top, you know? And most of us have been involved with a leader like that, whether it was a teacher or a college professor or someone that we did work with in a volunteer group. I've seen some of the biggest micromanagers in charity work that I've ever seen in my life was
Mm.
involved in that, which was crazy to think about, but yeah, it exists. When people are passionate, these things come out. But the micromanager, you can know them. They're obsessed on impressing their boss. Okay, that instead of serving the needs that might really be be needed, okay? So, instead of finding out what the needs are and how to make those things better, they're more trying to paint the big picture for the boss, to get the boss to look because I think they tend to want to be upwardly mobile, and they think that's a way to do it, to be
Yeah.
this hard driver.
Sure.
Um, and they can, let's see. Oh, I every conversation that you have, if you're under their leadership, they're just constantly badgering you about the minutiae of your work. Like everything is a performance review. If you're getting up to go get a cup of coffee, you can't even do that without feeling this pressure.
Sure. So, have you ever had a leader that was defined as a micromanager?
Yes,
Okay. How did that make
yes.
you feel?
Um, it made me very resistant
Yeah. I've
to anything they wanted to do. Like,
I've
I'm
had that.
sorry, I'm that weak.
I've certainly have had that too. It makes me feel like I'm not trusted. That you know maybe you hired me to do something, but you're micromanaging me. So if you hired me, wouldn't you give me a little ounce of trust that maybe I can do the job that you feel like I can do? So that's I think if you're looking at micromanagement, I think you have to look at it both ways. Are you the recipient of it? How does that make you feel? Or do sometimes we guilty as leaders to micromanage either our kids, micromanage our employees, whatever the case may be? When we're doing that, we're showing them number one, it's not okay to fail. Like
Right,
again, I
right,
think it's okay to fail. That's
right.
where a lot of us learn to grow is in failing. So it's okay. And we also need to make sure that we're letting people that look up to us know that we do trust them. I have 100% confidence in you. Now, if they screw up, if they mess up, we also have to be in a place where we're giving them some grace and it's okay. Here's
Right.
here's where we can learn. Here's how we can do something better. But micromanaging, whenever I micromanage, I don't respect the boss. I feel like
No.
they have no trust in me whatsoever, no confidence in me. And if you have no confidence in me, it's hard for me to have confidence in myself.
Well, for me, there was always this element of being suffocated, like, not physically, but just creatively. I would come in with no energy, even if it was just, and this happened on a couple of occasions. And one was two were work environment, and then two were charity environment, and that is just not something that the recipient can thrive in, okay? And and they did meet the extreme qualifications. They weren't balanced, okay? Like, I've had lots of different leaders over the course of years. I'm just giving the closest to the extremes in these examples that I can. Um, I know that you dealt with this at one time because every decision or every, client you had for this particular person that was in leadership over you, everything you said, every article, everything you did had to be met with their approval. And so, very, very low productivity. And we're going to talk about what the results are of a
Mhm.
micromanager in just a second. Employees are afraid to share their opinions, and like you said, um, project bottlenecks. You can't get anything completed. You're just stifled, like just stifled. And it's going to be interesting. Some of these things are shared with the other extreme. High turnover, the talent leaves. Okay. Um, and there's since the talent leaves, there's no flexibility, there's no creativity, there's no push for ongoing, progressive, just futuristic concepts, or that just kind of stalls out. And if you're not growing, what are you doing?
Yeah.
You,
Well,
you're not
uh,
growing.
yeah. No one is stagnant, growing or going backwards.
Right. So if you're not growing, you are going backwards. So those are the symptoms of that type of leader. Now, before we get to the next one, I also want to be really fair, because sometimes we're just immature followers and we go and look for problems in leadership. Like we just, we don't have any consistency or self discipline in our own lives. So we just want to blame who's in charge of this. And I don't want to go there. I'm just talking about in the most extreme situations, because this is for people right now who are leading others or getting ready to. And so they can understand why they may be moving in a backwards position, like take a good long look at yourself. Do
Yeah.
you fulfill these
I
things?
think we're talking about this topic, not so much for you to go and look at how awful your current leader
Right.
is. We're really
Right.
talking about this topic because, again, we're all leading other people and we're leading ourselves or we're leading our family. Um, so, really, in talking about this, we're talking about how does this, how, I need to look in the mirror at my leadership style. What can I do differently? Are there things that I need to tweak or change in how I'm leading other people?
Compass Sales Coaching is a proud sponsor of Latitude Podcast. Your success is achievable. Compass Sales Coaching can help you with details and plans to plot your course. Why not enjoy the journey and work with professionals who can help you with realistic steps, manageable career and business growth, and proven results? Contact Compass Sales Coaching today. Your journey to success starts here. CompassSalesCoaching.com.
Except the
It's my
glasses.
eyeglasses. They broke, but I've
So,
still got lenses. So we're going to go with it,
all
but
good.
yeah, they weren't passive at all about breaking. They're just like, done with you. So what this is type, what I call the part B. And we're going to give some symptoms of this. I have also, like everyone else, experienced both work style leaders that, where I was trying to earn money and my boss was like this. This is called the passive leader. I've also experienced it in some charity groups, things like that. Um, and I'm going to give the most extreme positions on this that I experienced. The people that fall in the middle, they didn't, meet either extreme, because, or somewhere in that balance. They may have leaned one way or the other, but I'm talking about that went on over to as extreme position as you could possibly be. And on passive leaders, I've got to ask you, what's your experience with that?
With passive leadership,
Yeah.
oh, goodness. I mean, we're not going to share names on this at
No.
all. But, and number one, I know I've been guilty of this in leadership style. So it's not what I lean into anymore. However, I know this has been in my past of being a passive leader. And I think one reason we do this in leadership is because we have this fear of somebody not liking us or not wanting to be our friend. So we go the easy route of being a passive leader. And when you do that in a business, number one, what you're doing is really upsetting the people that work for you, that are your rock stars and your all stars, because you're not addressing the cancer that may be in
You
your
mean you're
business.
upsetting the talent
Oh,
when
you're
you talk
upsetting
talk
the
about the
talent,
rock
and if you
stars and
don't
everything,
if
you're
you don't
upsetting
deal
them.
with things and just be concise and clear, and I think that's, that's what a lot of times when I think of passive leaders, they know there's a problem, but how they deal with a problem is in generalities instead of being really laser specific on here's what we need to work with, here's what we need to deal with. And you don't have to, the opposite of passive leadership does not mean that you're a dictator, but it does mean that you're clear in your communication. It does mean that you're hitting the nail on the head with what needs to be addressed. And so I know there's been times in my life I haven't done that. I've also seen this in settings that aren't a business that have completely destroyed
Yeah, it's very
the
self-destructive.
organization.
That's right.
You
I've
know,
seen that too. And um, something with passive leadership and the extreme micromanager, they do share several things in common. And then I'm going to go specifically to the symptoms of a passive leader. But that is at their root, they're both very self serving. And you would think logically that someone who's passive and giving you the reins, that that's a very selfless thing to do.
no,
But
it's
the end
opposite.
result is no, it's an inability and a desire to not deal with problems because it's very uncomfortable.
Mm.
And you just don't want to get out of your comfort zone. And you like that shell and you want to stay in that little shell and you don't like confrontation.
Yep.
So that's one of the symptoms. And I'm going to read the rest. Um, they'll tell you that they may even like point blank say, yeah, I don't like confrontation. And I know that happened, but I know that we can, work together on this. So in a way, they're bringing you the problem.
Hmm.
That we can work together on this other problem that this other person caused. And instead of me, the leader, going and talking to them specifically and confronting them, I'm going to come to you and we're going to just work behind the scenes because I know that you've got the talent and you're the rock star here. So I know I can depend on you to get me out of this. Another thing that they'll do is they, after a certain period of time, I've seen this too, they'll surprise their team by bringing someone else on and putting them without ever talking to the team or talking to maybe somebody that they put in charge of something specific with the team. They'll bring on someone else and say, oh, they're taking over your role now. Like, again, they are bringing someone else in to fix their problem, but they communicated nothing. They're very poor with detailed communication, like you said, and it wreaks havoc. So they will delegate tasks, and then behind the scenes, they'll take it right back and not tell the person they delegated to. It's totally a total passive move. And how does that make you feel when that happens? I can tell you, uh, I was surprised publicly one time by having being told 3 weeks prior that I was taking on this new position by this leader, that this leader said, here, I want you to take this group and I want you to work with them and I want you to use your skills to help improve them. And 3 weeks later, when we're coming to a demonstration, I was told we're not doing that anymore by the leader. And here, this person's actually going to do it. I mean, I was so confused.
Hmm.
And later on, we'll have another episode on how do you deal with passive leaders? How do you deal with
Yeah,
micromanagers?
I think
Like,
that's a
how do you deal with
great
this?
topic and just dive into,
But there's more.
and
Yeah,
the damages that can occur,
yeah,
because
that's
it's a
what's
lot.
happened.
I think it's probably the most dangerous type of leadership that there is.
Well, it's I'm not getting this just from my experience. I went online and found oodles of information, and these are just the symptoms given by others who have experienced it, and they're detrimental to an organization because like micromanagers, they demotivate people. That I mean, that's just they share that. Um, they have no focus, no direction, because a lot of times I think there's not a lot of self-discipline going on.
No.
They're not executing discipline, and they're not, uh, projecting it in their own lives. Um, and so another thing that happens with them, um, is in telltale sign, um, they can be really self-absorbed because the reason why they're passive is they're only concerned with the next job that they're going to. And, like, they're kind of passive because they've already got one foot out the door and they just simply
Mm-mm.
don't care. They're always upwardly mobile, and they think that the more passive they are and the less, hard decisions that they have to make, the more employable they'll be for the next position or the next level, that they'll get to attain. They can cause, stilted creativity. We saw that with the micromanaging,
Yes.
you
Yep.
know, um, and the reason why would that be? The stilted creativity.
Well, I think when that's what you're portraying, you're showing that you don't trust me. And if you can't trust me, I mean, I'm just kind of shutting down as a human. I don't think that I need to be creative anymore. What difference does it make? And I don't think it's making a difference.
Right.
Right.
Right. And the talent starts leaving.
Yeah.
There's a saying that says when mediocrity is the accepted norm, the greatness leaves.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So I've seen that a lot with passive leaders. Um, and then I think there's a certain procrastination involved with these type of leaders. They don't really want to make decisions. They just want to procrastinate. So nothing gets done. The productivity is extremely low.
Right. I think that's part of it. However, I think honestly, from a passive leadership position, the root cause of most passive leaders is fear of not being liked. I think that is the number one cause. They don't want enemies. They don't want enemies.
Really?
But
So
what
this is like a psychological, possibly a deep need?
I mean, it's just the need of being liked. And when you're sometimes when you're having to have a tough conversation with somebody, the end result may not be good, right? But at least the other person knows how you feel. I feel with a
Right, that's true.
passive leader, if I'm in an organization where there is a passive leader, I always have this question mark with them. Like, I don't know that I can completely trust what you're saying. I don't know exactly what maybe you're even telling me. I think it's almost like some form of chaos that's involved anytime there's a passive leader. I do think it's interesting, though, a lot of the end result from a passive leader or a micromanager, the end result a lot of times is the exact same.
Right. Right.
Right.
It's very interesting. They may be coming from polar opposites, but end result is the talent leaves, the productivity is low, you don't meet your objectives, you're not growing. So there's got to be some things that you can do, and we're going to get into this on the next episode. What if you are involved with either extreme? What if you are the leader and you are one of the extremes? We're going to get involved in that with the next episode, but I conducted a little informal poll.
Okay.
Okay. So, and it was interesting. I asked probably 25 people that are involved in work or involved in a volunteer situation, what type of leader do you prefer? And they had two choices, and it was the micromanager. And I didn't have to explain what that was. Everybody gets it
Yep.
because I also think that's the one that's in everybody's head.
Sure.
And number two, I did have to explain the passive leader and give a little bit of a description. And people are like, "Is there another option?" That was one of the first questions. Is there I'm like, "No, you have to choose one extreme or the other.
Hmm.
And so I got a 30% or 33%, 33%, and 33% return. So it's interesting. I had about a third of people said they would pick type A and they would give the reason, you know.
Okay.
And the reason was I'm that type of boss myself. So if I have to work for someone, I want it to be that. So it was like they understand that level, so they're going to work for that. It's interesting though, most of the ones who said I'm that type of boss are self-employed. So they're not working for that type of
Okay.
boss.
All
So
right.
they said they would work
Sure.
for that kind of leader. Okay, so in their mindset, it was all about work and that kind of thing. The people who picked B are people who work for someone else, every single one of them, and
So what is B? That is
the
passive.
passive.
Okay.
B was passive, and every single one of them are employees. And some of them said, however, I really think a better option would be in certain situations, unless I don't know how to do something, and they'll be willing to step in and show me how to do it, and then leave me alone. So there was some caveats on that, like
Yeah.
but it was interesting on that. And then I had some good responses that were like, it depends on the situation.
So that was the third
That
option. Depends
there
on the
wasn't a third option.
Okay.
That's just
Right.
they're like, well, in this scenario, I think one of them brought up like a restaurant scenario where the ingredients and due to the health department and all, where you have to be very specific where you're serving food. They would not want a passive leader on that, because but they said in other situations a passive leader might work. But then no one responded. There were only a couple that didn't respond without saying this one, but only if they could do X, Y, and Z. So everybody wanted to change, with the exception of two respondents, what that extreme was. Like they wanted to fix the extreme. Two of the responders did not, but
Okay.
everybody else did. They chose one extreme, but it was like only if this, only if that. So um it was really, really interesting. I had one responder say, uh, there's no way to pick either one without saying, if you stick to one, you're not a good leader. That was a really good response, I thought.
Yeah. So I think that tells us what people desire is going to be something that's in between
Right.
where, I think it's easy to think of a passive leader as someone that they do care for you. Well, you can still be a micromanager and care for the other
And be
person.
compassionate. Yeah.
And by the way that you're demonstrating your leadership abilities, might need to be tweaked,
Right.
And I mean, thinking of like a micromanager, and I've definitely have worked for one before, and I definitely have left where I was at before when I had that. I want to be led. Number one, everybody needs a leader. You
Right.
need someone that you're following and someone that is leading you. I wanted to be led. I don't need it to cost me an hour to 2 hours a day in being all up in what I'm doing. If I'm doing a good job, I
Right.
don't
Right.
need that. Now, do I still need direction? Absolutely. I still needed it and craved it, but I don't need every single thing I'm looking at, because what you're doing is number one, you show me again, going back to it, you don't trust me. Secondly, you may be telling me that you're not convinced that I have enough talent or gifts or potential to do what you want me to do. So, I want direction. I don't need to be micromanaged. I want leadership. So, you know, I'm sure we'll get into this later in another podcast about what is ideal in leading people and how do you make a switch if you've been a passive leader or you've been a micromanager, either one. How do you transition into being a leader that people respect and want to work for. And remember at the beginning of the podcast, we said persuade others. It's persuading other people to do what you want them to do, but they want to do it.
Right.
I think that's when you can get to that level of leadership, you know that you're really reaching someone.
Right. And conversely, what are we going to do if we are being led by one of these extremes? There are ways to work through this, and there are
Ways to work
options
through it,
that
and
you
then
have.
sometimes it
We're
needs to
gonna
be
go,
terminated.
yeah, and the
So,
way that you can go about doing that. But I'm reminded as we close this out, you know, Jesus had 12 disciples. How did he lead them? I think that that's something I want to think about, because that's a really big example
yeah,
that no matter what our faith, we can at least acknowledge he was here on this earth and he had 12 disciples. How did he manage those? So,
yeah, I'm actually looking forward to talking about that because I
yeah,
think we can go into that in great detail,
yeah,
and that is the type of leader we should all desire to be.
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Well, I hope this has been inspirational to you, or you learned a little bit. I've learned quite a bit by doing some research and just expressing my own. Everybody has a history. Some of my information came from Forbes, some of it came from Harvard Business, and then other places on the web. Just, these are just our opinions and our experiences. We're not telling you exactly what to do. We're just sharing from experience and information and some education that we've both gained along the way, and we want to be helping you. You want to close this out?
yeah. So again, like Trish said, thank you so much for joining us. Again, our desire is to we're all on a path, and I think we all have a destination that God has us in the future. And are we striving to walk that daily? And it's a daily learning curve. I don't think any of us, and we're certainly not proclaiming that we have arrived. Um,
If this is it, then we're all in a lot of trouble.
exactly.
Because look, I'm so, together here showing you my broken glasses.
Yeah. But hey, we're broken people and we're learning,
Yeah,
and that's the
absolutely.
key. So hey, we look forward to joining you again in the next podcast, and we'll go into a little bit about Jesus' leadership style. I'm
Awesome.
excited about
And
that.
how you can work with either extreme, or how you can mitigate those waters between being whichever leader extreme you are, and how to balance.
All right, thank you guys for listening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you for climbing with us on this episode of Latitude. Be sure to click on our special guest, sponsor, affiliate links, summaries of today's episode, and more.